Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Platitude Era podcast. In this episode of the podcast, we will be reviewing the movie The Lighthouse. Give us a brief synopsis about this movie, The Lighthouse.
A young man starts work at a lighthouse.
So it's about a young man, and he has a mentor? Because I know he's not alone. It's about two guys.
Yes, sure. He has a mentor, a superior. He works underneath, another man at the lighthouse.
So when we talk about movies here, we like to start at the beginning. We like to analyze the marketing. Why did we go see this movie? And why did you want to see this movie?
Well, I'm going to say marketing was mostly non-existent. I don't think I saw any trailers or commercials or anything. I think mostly from what I heard about this movie is just, it's one of those kind of indie movies that makes the festival circuit or whatever, and is getting pretty critical acclaim.
And the reason why I saw this movie was because you saw it, and I think I heard a couple things here. So the marketing was pretty much word of mouth that this is like a really smart artistic piece that, it's one of those, if you're a fan of cinema, you have to see this movie. And tell me about the story. What do you think of the story?
It's a very simple story. I think this movie's more character driven. It's about the relationship between these two characters, or I guess whatever scenario they're in, and how it evolves and changes these people as the movie goes on.
I guess for the story, for me, what I noticed was that a lot of people that have seen this movie talk about, it's got all these different levels and you gotta analyze it. And for me, I guess the story is pretty much about these two guys alone in a lighthouse. They're isolated from everybody else. I think there's even a line where William Dafoe asks Robert Pattinson, he says, "Why did you take this job?" And he says, I needed the money, so I took a lighthouse job. And the further away I moved away from civilization, the more I got paid. So I don't know if it was true that in those times, what is this, 1900? It takes place in 1900, so they were going to pay him $1,000 to be a lighthouse guy.
Something like that.
And it was a lighthouse that was pretty much far away from everybody. So as the movie progresses, I guess these two guys, I don't know if it's both of them or Robert Pattinson himself, start experiencing that isolation, and they start losing their minds. So they start suffering from cabin fever.
Well, it's kind of like, so Willem Dafoe is like the legacy lighthouse keeper, where he's been doing it for a long time, and he seems, I guess, to have adjusted to it. Like, this whole thing is like I guess it's cabin fever, descent into madness, or whatever. But like, you see Willem Dafoe's character, and you're like, is he adjusted to this? Is he experiencing the same thing Robert Pattinson's character is? Is it like, are they experiencing the same thing? Are they different? It's hard to say, and I think that's part of, I guess, where you could analyze this movie more, is like, how are these two people being affected? Because Willem Dafoe is not really the primary protagonist. He's just like kind of another character that's, he's like secondary, and you follow Robert Pattinson enough through it. But like, I don't know, just I guess the way Robert Pattinson adjusts to it, you're led to assume that Willem Dafoe's experiencing something different. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I guess that's the whole point of the movie.
Is this another example of, they talked about it, or I guess the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix made this phrase popular, the unreliable narrator? Would Robert Pattinson be the unreliable narrator in this movie?
Yeah, I'd say so. There's a lot of that. They're both parallel in like, like the movie, like in the beginning, teases you with it, where it's like, I think Robert Pattinson's like scrubbed the floor or something. Willem Dafoe's like, "Oh, you didn't scrub the floor proper," and it's like, "Yes, I did." And eventually, as the movie goes on, you kind of question, and it's like, "Oh, did he scrub the floor? Didn't he scrub the floor?" So that like it's one of those things where like the movie drops a little hint at the beginning where like you don't think anything of it to begin with, but as the movie progresses, you're like, so that was like the like one of the inciting incidents or something. It's like, oh, he it started way before, and then the movie goes on and weird stuff happens, and then it plays with your head about like time or whatever other weird movie. This movie's, I don't know, it's very cerebral in its execution.
This movie is for what kind of people would this movie be for? Because this movie, you could interpret it so many different ways. Like you said, one way is he the unreliable narrator, or another way
Mm.
is this movie's more of one of those journey or ride films where it's not about the story, the beginning, middle, and the end, but it's more like you're following along these characters. They're taking you on a ride.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is very much in the wheelhouse of the artsy, the artsy film house, cinema house, like movies of like, oh, it's not trying to take you on a like blockbuster action packed journey. It's like a character study about two different characters, and I've seen a handful of movies where like it just gets boring and pretentious and drawn out, and you just can't stand the movie for existing. And I think for a lot of, I mean, this movie's like at around 50% or something on Rotten Tomatoes, or actually, no, it was actually pretty high. Never mind. But I think that like
The
for this movie,
unreliable host.
yeah, the unreliable me, the liar me, the Robert Pattinson of this show. Well, just like I think, or this movie has a higher score critically and audience-ally. I think just because the actors deliver great performances. For me personally, I was never bored. I was never like checking my watch. I mean, I think it is a bit slower and a little bit more drawn out, but I think that's part of the point of the movie. It's because, these people are here for such a long time and time is kind of affecting their mental states. So for me, I was entertained enough by this movie. I know there's people who are less patient than I would probably be checking their watches and probably be annoyed by this movie. But as far as those kinds of movies, those kinds of artsy like cinema movies, putting the enema in cinema. I don't know what that means. The enema in cinema. I don't know what the fuck I'm trying to say. But like, just really trying to go for it. I think there's worse offenders to that genre of film than this. I think I mean, if you could kind of see this movie as a dark comedy, if you squint real hard at it, but I was never bored. I was pretty entertained by this. I didn't try and I didn't read too much into this movie. I'm like, oh, I hear that this movie's trying to be this or this. I didn't try to overanalyze it. I just kind of sat back and enjoyed what I saw. I just took it for what it was and just like essentially two characters slowly over the course of time becoming mad or whatever.
And while I was watching this movie, I mean, sure, there are going to be some people that are cinema tours, like you said, that are really love movies and they love the way this movie's crafted because I hear, oh, the way the shots are framed, the lighting, everything. I'm in love with everything. But me, as I'm watching it, I'm I, I'm sorry, but I'm not a fan of character pieces. I'm more of a fan of stories. And as I'm watching the story, I'm thinking, why did this movie get made? And I thought about it, and I think the director was a big fan of that scene in Jaws where you had the three guys on the boat and they're making their way to kill Jaws. And while they're on this boat ride, they start talking and bonding. And that's what it kind of felt like because there was a lot of scenes where Robert Pattinson and William Dafoe are talking. Sometimes they're bonding, sometimes they're fighting. So I think the director or the writer saw Jaws and said, "Oh, I want to make a movie about that, about those characters that just talk. They're in an isolated place and they're talking. They're out at sea. So we're gonna have, that inspiration from Jaws, as well as why don't we throw a little bit of the Twilight Zone in there? So we got the black and white, a la Twilight Zone, and then we got these twists and turns like in the Twilight Zone. You think the story is going somewhere, and you have no idea where the story is going. And this movie's famous for its black and white color, its aspect ratio. Because when I was watching the theater, uh, the movie, the frame did not fill up the whole screen. It had a unique aspect ratio, and I also got hints of Zorba the Greek. I don't know if you
Uh,
ever saw that movie.
nope, I did not. I have no idea what that is.
It's a black and white movie, and it's about two guys and their journey through Greece. One guy's this very serious, uptight guy, which could be considered Robert Pattinson in this, and the other guy is Zorba, just this free-loving guy who loves fun, who isn't a fan of rules and order. And I guess William Dafoe could be considered Zorba.
Mm.
And as far as the acting here, William Dafoe, I guess he based his acting from the sea captain on The Simpsons. There were quite a few moments where he had that sea captain voice where he talked like this, and you think he's a pirate, but he's not. He's just a man at sea, and he's got the tone and the mannerisms of the sea captain from The Simpsons. And Robert Patterson, he went through several different emotions in this movie. Uh, I guess there was moments where he just started losing his mind. I guess he figured that being isolated, being away from people, that's something I fantasize. That's something I want to be a part of. And as time progressed, I guess it's something that everybody fantasizes, or some people fantasize about being alone. But at a certain point, you gotta come back to civilization, to prevent your mind from going mad. Maybe that's why we fantasize about it, we romanticize about isolation, but in prison, solitary confinement is a form of punishment. I see I left you speechless with my analysis.
No, it sounded like you were going to keep going, but then you stopped.
Oh yeah.
Uh, yeah, sure. I wouldn't necessarily say Robert Pattinson's character wanted isolation. I mean, he tells a story of kind of the reason why he decided to, separate himself from civilization. It's not necessarily something he wanted, I guess, but just something he kind of did out of necessity. But then, once again, unreliable narrator. It's hard to say what was what in that movie. But yeah, you could say more of that for Willem Dafoe's character because he seemed to always want to be at the lighthouse. He didn't like the idea of not having the lighthouse. He loved the lighthouse or whatever. He was, just I think he's the kind of character drawn to that, and then Robert Pattinson's character is the one who's just kind of, thrown into the deep end, and then became what he became by the end of the movie. So I mean, madness takes different forms, I guess, or putting yourself in a situation that you're unable to acclimatize yourself to, and then how it affects different people. It all depends, I guess.
Yeah, there are so many ways to analyze this movie and interpret this movie. Um, I don't know. For me, I like story. I'm not much of a character piece. I don't know about you. What kind of movies do you like?
Well, I mean, for the like I said, I mean, I can bash a movie for being too pretentious and garbagey, but I mean, this movie rides the line for me. I enjoy the performances enough. I mean, I think the dialogue is well written enough where, like, I mean, if you have a tough time understanding accents, this might be a movie to skip, or waiting until you can get it digitally and put some closed captions on top of it. But I liked the dialogue. It's a lot of humor. Like I said, it's a dark comedy, and sometimes a dark comedy isn't for everybody. You should really silence your shit. A dark comedy isn't for everybody, or like sometimes it's not a straight up comedy. Obviously, it's got a lot of dramatic elements to it. But I don't know. I just I enjoy the comedy when I got it. I enjoy the performances. I do think Willem Dafoe played a great sea captain. Uh, Robert Pattinson, I mean, I don't know. I think just he did a lot physically as an actor. Just I don't know. He just did a lot of physical work where he didn't say a lot that led me to believe he was mad, but he did a lot. just a whole lot of actions he did. Just I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it for that. I think what helped me for this movie is not hearing a lot about this movie. I just heard it was good. I didn't hear it was like the greatest movie ever or anything. Because I think a lot of the times people like get that in their head, in their expectations for a movie, and then it just diminishes whatever the movie was trying to go for. So knowing as little as possible for this movie definitely helped my enjoyment of the movie, and just I don't know, just watching these characters and just doing whatever.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Robert Pattinson because I had one more detail here in my notes that I forgot to mention. Um, I think the director had a fun time torturing Robert Pattinson because there were scenes in there that fit with the movie, and it had to be a part of the movie. But you could tell, oh man, poor Robert Pattinson. You could tell the director's torturing him. I think there's quite a few scenes here where he's taking the abuse from William Dafoe. There's these other scenes where he's working. Where is he working at? Where it's at the bottom, and he's working on this machine, so he has to deal with the heat.
It's like I don't know, it's like a steam engine, but that's like what makes like the whistle go, or so ships can hear where the lighthouse is.
So he had to do that, and then he had to deal with the birds. There were seagulls in this movie, and sometimes they were very aggressive, or they were annoying him. And so there was quite a few instances where I thought to myself, I don't know how Robert Pattinson could deal with being in a movie like this. And I guess that was part of the experience of the movie, how it made you want to feel like you were watching something that was filmed during the black and white film era, because there were some directors that were known for torturing their actors, like Alfred Hitchcock. And Sam Raimi, who directed the Evil Dead movies and Army of Darkness, was a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock, and he liked to follow that model and torture his actors too. Something that Bruce Campbell has said in interviews, that he's been tortured by Sam Raimi. I think one of them was he was doing a stunt in Evil Dead, and he stepped wrong, and he twisted his ankle, and as he was walking back to a different shooting location, or to the trailers, Sam Raimi kept poking his ankle with a stick. And as far as recommendations, well, let's see what everyone had to say. Well, our friends at Rotten Tomatoes, the critics gave this movie a 92%. Audience gave it a 70% score. What's your recommendation?
For me, for me personally, I think it's closer to an 80, but I guess I'm surprised the audience is that high, but like I said, I think maybe the performances shine through the most for this. I mean, it could be easy to be bored by this, a simpleton such as yourself, who demands more out of a film. But I think the performances do enough to carry this movie through. I mean, hopefully, like, kind of general movie going audiences don't get bored where they like just whip out their phone and just kind of half-ass watch the movie, like dig around on their phone. Because I think this is a movie worth paying attention to the performances. Like, they're really great performances. I don't think this movie leans too far on the side of pretentious art shit. I do think that this movie, like I said, it rides that line enough, and I think it's a worthwhile shot to take for like a general movie going audience to sit through and try and bear through this movie, because I guess it's kind of the point of the movie is to try and endure this movie as the characters do. I think it's worthwhile. Is it worth going to the paying full admission and you're like $75 in a reclining movie theater? No. Is it maybe worth like $8 to go into a bargain movie theater, like your art housey movie theater? Yeah, maybe. Do I recommend you wait till this comes out on for home video only? I'd say no, only so you're not reluctant in watching this movie and then forced to whip out your phone out of sheer boredom or whatever.
My recommendation for this is skip it. This movie is, to quote Harvey Dent from Batman Forever, played by Tommy Lee Jones, This is a movie of two minds. Either, there's that artist called Andy Warhol who painted the soup can, and some people say, I don't see what the big deal is. He just painted a can of soup. And other people say, oh, wow, this is art. And they see more in it than somebody like me would see. So if you're like me and you've seen Andy Warhol's painting of the soup can and you don't think it's a big deal, he just painted a soup can, skip this movie. You're not gonna enjoy it. It's too artistic for me. If you're one of the people that has seen Andy Warhol's painting and you appreciate the soup can painting and you see it as art, then you might enjoy this movie just because of the different levels and the analysis. Also, if you're one of those artistic fans, it'll make you appreciate this movie in the sense that you see actors in blockbuster films, and it doesn't look like they're working very hard as actors. And it's like, okay, it's just they make it seem very simple. I don't see what the big deal is, why they're getting paid millions of dollars. But if you watch something like this, where William Dafoe and Robert Pattinson actually put in the acting and you know what it is to be an actor watching this movie, you consume that and say, okay, these people are actors. Now I know what an actor is and the hard work that they have to put through. You might enjoy this film. But another thing that I wanted to mention here was I had a college professor a while ago, and he was talking to me about he was talking to the class about a character piece. He saw this play, and it was about characters, and they were just dialogue and talking. And he said this quote, and it's something that I recalled watching this movie, that this movie is pretty much like masturbating without the climax. You're watching the movie, the story slowly build, the acting building, it's going somewhere. And then all of a sudden, there's no big payoff or no finish. You're just left, what? Okay. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Well, I mean, you and I have fundamental disagreements on how we feel about this movie, but I mean, I do feel it does have a payoff. I mean, I'm gonna say the last scene of the movie isn't the payoff, but I'd say the scene before the last scene is the payoff of the movie. I'd say that the climactic battle is the payoff of the movie, not necessarily what happens at the end
It's just
with
that
the lighthouse.
I wrote all
For
these
me
notes.
personally, I mean, I don't know about what the filmmaker was going for necessarily. Like, as I keep, going back to, is I appreciate the performances more so than the story. I didn't take away from this movie like, oh, this movie's really trying to tell me something. All I saw was like two great actors doing, knocking it out of the ballpark. That's my takeaway from the movie.
Well, I just thought with everything that I wrote in my recommendation, these notes, I thought you were going to say, wow, that's really brilliant what you said.
No, I didn't like anything you said, but hey,
Not the Andy Warhol part.
no, I mean, I mean, I think I don't know if unless you're a pretentious asshole, I don't think people. Not saying that you are. I think you just wanted to say something that made you think that you were smart.
Yes,
I don't,
I did.
I'm curious about like now that we're on this tangent, if Andy Warhol is actually treated as like a great genius of like, oh wow, he was such a great artist, or is he just one of those people who was like, oh, I was able to manipulate art into getting people to talk about my weird shit. So there's those movie makers. I mean, so like to go back to art house bullshit or whatever. I mean, maybe this is a different approach to that, but I think like I kept thinking of the movie Mother and how much I like, eventually I turned around on it. I'm not saying it's a good, like a movie I like a lot or, I appreciate it for its artfulness, but I just remember sitting in the movie theater watching that movie and being like, fuck, this movie. But like, I never went like that for this movie. Like I don't know if this is an art house movie, but it's another movie where like it feels like it's trying too hard. Was Annihilation. That's another movie where it's just like I'm sitting in the movie theater and going, why? So, like there's some movies that are just all I can think is in my head is fuck, why, and why can't I just whip out my phone so I can be bored, so I can like distract myself from this horrendous boredom. But then there's some other movies like this one I'm gonna put there, Hereditary. I'll put there as far as like indie movies, which I'd say are more challenging, but I think, if you're patient enough with it and willing to go along on the ride, then, I think it's a fulfilling enough, journey to go along with.
So it seems like this is a movie that
It's a challenge, but not a slog.
over time, it'll make you think different things. Your opinion as far as the movie will change over time.
Mm, Depends. Like I said, I wasn't like trying with this movie. I wasn't like, we said, oh, you can analyze this movie 15 cajillion different ways. I mean, you can like, in a bare bones interpretation of this movie is just, oh, it's two guys go nuts, and that's kind of what I took from it. And like I said, the performances were enough for me. That was enough fat for me to chew on.
All right, everyone. We're gonna creep into the spoiler discussion. I don't know if you're looking forward to that.
This is like, I mean, I was pretty vague in my whole topic, or analysis of this movie. So I guess you can bring up whatever you want for the spoiler talk, and we can dish on that.
Well, no, I'm disappointed. If you didn't think my Andy Warhol comment was brilliant, then my
I don't think
spoiler
anything you
stuff
say is brilliant. I mean, you're the pretentious art asshole that thinks he has something important to say, and me, I'm just a Gene Siskel over here.
All right, everybody. So we're creeping into the spoiler, but before we do, we're gonna buy you a little time to decide whether you want to be spoiled or not be spoiled. So first and foremost, we want to thank everybody that's listening to our podcast on the go. If you're listening to us through the Anchor app, Spotify, anywhere you download to listen to podcasts, those podcast playing apps, Google Podcasts. Thank you, Platitude Era. We will be going into the spoiler section momentarily. If you're watching us on the YouTube, well, our next video is going to be spoiler talk of Lighthouse. So we want to thank you guys for watching this YouTube video. Don't forget to subscribe to us. Hit that cowbell notification because we post irregularly. And hey, join the movement. Help us turn the establishment upside down. Our goal is to get max subscribers with a minimum effort. So we want to get 1 million subscribers with the least amount of videos posted on YouTube. And you could help us win the war, join the cause. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Platitude Era. And if you're into that social media junk, at Platitude Era, Twitter and Instagram at Platitude Era Show.